your answers. It's pretty accurate. It doesn't do definitional question answering. You can't say like, what is a camel? And it'll say a camel is a mammal. A camel is a definitional question answering, different type of definitional question answering than the one I mentioned earlier. This one will list out properties about the thing that you asked it. And so they also call it list-based question answering. So fact extraction, grammar correction speaks for itself. Intelligent tutoring systems is a very interesting area. There's a lot of knowledge that's encoded in text, right? Textbooks, right? These have a lot of interesting information. It would be useful to somehow find a way to, kind of like in the Matrix, program people with knowledge. I don't mean program them, obviously, critical thinking. Some of these things threaten that kind of stuff, and it's very important to be very robust in your critical thinking about the usage of these systems. Many of them are scary, and I'm a paranoid, so I think the government's using it to read all of Facebook and all these things, and they are. I mean, I was working on it for them, so. No, it's not trying, they're doing it. I was working, yeah, we computed
good information out.
Yeah. So basically, because, like, for instance, question answer, you guys didn't even know that they've been using that in intelligence field for 3 years, So intelligent tutoring systems are stuff that rapidly acquaints people with knowledge and verifies empirically that they have the knowledge through tests. And so we have a system called System X, and we're trying to, so it looks at, so why I need definition extraction, and there's one system out there, E4TLR or something, that does definition extraction. But that would be very useful for developing what are called pedagogical models or pedagogical objects. What are they called? I forget what they're called. I like to throw that word in there. It's used. For extracting the definitions and then teaching the use of them. If you know the definitions that are in a given text, you can figure out which texts are dependencies for which other text based on when the definition is presented in which text. So you can figure out that, say, this textbook has dependencies to this textbook, so this textbook needs to be read first. You can create a dependency chart, and then you can look at the time constraints that a learner has to learn it. Say they only have 2 days and they need to brush up on encryption because they have they're having an interview and they need to do well on it. Well, I actually used this and I passed the test because the software, plotted out a course for me to read and read it to me with a program of the FRDCSA called CLEAR, Computer Learning Architecture, which uses text-to-speech to read books to you. And so it was all calculated out using a prototype version of the software. So the intelligent tutoring system, just a second, intelligent tutoring system is a very useful application, especially for knowledge encoded in natural language. You had a question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So language engineering, that's where you, again, build ontologies about these different objects. Mention named entity, classification, recognition, name resolution. I can't even think what that is right now. News filtering, we mentioned that, question answering. Okay, recognizing textual entailment. If you have 2 sentences, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, and the quick brown fox jumped earlier today, or not necessarily earlier today, but jumped. You could say that the second sentence was implied by the first one, that if the first one was true, the second one must be true. Now, it's obviously with respect to given context, and there are different contexts that one could be speaking in. Like, I went to the bank. Well, am I referring to the bank, the store bank, or the bank on the river? So there's a lot of ambiguity in natural languages. That's the chief benefit and difficulty with natural language processing. So if you went to the, so you can ask the system, does this sentence imply this sentence? And recognizing textual entailment uses all sorts of lexical knowledge and common sense knowledge and real world knowledge, and tries to make that deduction. And that's a very powerful thing. We're going to be using it for our POSI system to determine whether goals are identical. So again, it's context specific, and we're working on, my friend has a theory called patterns and context. He'd love it if I mentioned it. And it goes on and on about how to represent information metaphorically. He's kind of the expert with that, but we're going to implement that as a cognitive architecture for natural languages. So there's something that is more along the lines of MOIOS or a framework that you're interested in. Record linkage, it's kind of a related field. You have a whole bunch of entries in the database. How do you determine which are identical entries? That's common. Relation extraction, I mentioned. Semantic annotation. So there's a system out there called OpenKLA. It's spelled like this. It's I don't recommend it because it's a web service and it's not a software. I'm trying to re-implement the software for myself. I don't like sending them all my private information and having them read all of it, especially when they're annotating it for entities and stuff. So, but they send back an entity annotated version that says what are all the named entities, what type of named entity are they, so that's semantic annotation. Semantic labeling, I can't remember what that is right now. Statistical trend detection, that's looking at, I'll skip that, can't remember. Text analysis, there's this area related to natural language processing called text mining. That's where you do all sorts of statistical analysis of corpora, and try to. There's all sorts of things that you can, all sorts of questions you can answer with processing of text. It's very exciting. Text summarization. Given a piece of text, how do we acutely summarize this? To different levels, they have sentence-based or rewrite-based, paraphrasing-based approaches. There's different data sets that you can use to get started with that. There's a program called MEAD, which does summarization. I couldn't get it to work under AMD 64 the other day, so they need to fix that. So all these systems have been downloaded and packaged. I think I've said enough about different areas. If you want, well, there's only a few more, so I'll just go over it. But so the FRDCSA has all of these different software systems installed. And you can actually access them from Perl. So as I'm writing different systems, I'm all the time using one or another of these capabilities, and it rapidly accelerates the progress of that system. Text classification, I didn't even mention that. This is not an exhaustive list. This was just something I threw together at the last minute. That's where you take text, you break them into classes or categories, and so I was using that to sort files for a paperless office. You just scan it, OCR it, and then classify it into a given file. So, topic detection and tracking I mentioned. Topic gisting, again, that's kind of like summarization. I guess there's a technical difference there. And then word sense disambiguation. So, what's that?
Bank, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's that. So word sense disambiguation, it's notoriously inaccurate. 64% is state of the art, getting it right 64% of the time. It's close to apparently just choosing the most popular sense is almost as accurate as anyone can get it. So it's like, okay. So maybe the military systems are a little better, So BBC has some stuff. So there are many more besides. Developing an ontology, sort of a directory of all these different capabilities, problems, solutions, etc., is what the FRDCSA is doing. And it's not just doing it for NLP, but again, NLP is a very powerful subject because you're able to process text with it, and that allows you to derive more actionable intelligence. So there are some basic areas within it. As I mentioned earlier, tokenization. That's splitting it into individual tokens, breaking out the punctuation, getting rid of, I forget what they're called. There's stemming. That's where you break off the end and just go with the word stem. So like runner goes down to run. There's morphological analysis. I don't know what that is. Part of speech we mentioned is like diagramming sentences. Noun phrase chunking, that's just extracting. So like if I said the house by the sea, I think house by the sea is a noun phrase, or maybe it's not. But it's often, any sequence of nouns is called a noun phrase, and there might be allowed to have prepositions that add, I don't know the linguistics very well. I'm more of the programming side. Knowing linguistics obviously helps one a lot in this area, but I don't think it's a prerequisite at all. I think you can get off the ground because most of this stuff is pretty practical, and you can just, you don't have to know what type